Oh yeah. Today we're talking about the top 5 guns from the original Red Dawn. And what would happen? What guns would be used if Russia did what Russia does best? Kind of. And invaded the US. Huh. I don't know. Also, the 1984, the original, or the new Red Dawn? Which one's your favorite? Welcome back, everybody. Clint today with Classic Firearms, here to talk about Red Dawn. And I'm talking about the 1984 version of the movie with Patrick Swayze, Charlie Sheen, all that type of goodness. And we're talking about the top 5 guns from Red Dawn. And with that being said, some of the content and trademarks we're going to show you in this video are not ours, and this is not sponsored by any other company. We're not affiliated with MGM or any other production studio in any way. We just wanted to take a deep dive into the firearms they used in the filming of Red Dawn. So let's roll into it. So before we roll into this, spoiler alert. If you haven't seen the original Red Dawn movie, first of all, what's wrong with you? Are you even American? And secondly, Wolverine. So go watch that movie and then come back and see if this list, if this is a list that you agree with. So with that, let's just go ahead and hop right into this. All of the video clips that you're probably going to be seeing are going to come ultimately down from that one montage where they're just taking out all the invaders. All right, you got the the Russians, the Cubans, Nicaraguans, all that type of stuff, and it's a good time, right? So of course we know the entire premise of Red Dawn and what's happening, and one of the scenes that I really like is featuring the Remington 870 Wingmaster, which is my number 5 pick. First of all, the Remington 870 Wingmaster is one that is it's a gun that I hold. It's got a sentimental value to me. That was the first shotgun I ever shot just as a kid. It's one that I learned how to skeet shoot with and all that type of fun stuff, and it was one that I inherited when my dad died. So the Remington 870 Wingmaster, absolutely love. And my favorite scene is whenever he's cutting the barrel down. Well, that's illegal, and you're violating NFA laws and stuff like that. That's a felony by doing that. But don't tell that to some politicians who are cutting the barrels down of their AR-15s and whatnot, not realizing that they're also committing a felony. So anyway, make sure you know your gun laws out there. Or don't, go to prison, whatever. But anyway, the Remington 870 Wingmaster, my number 5 pick, and let's roll into number 4. So for my next pick, well, you might be thinking the RPK. Not quite. When that little ambush happens and you see Jennifer Grey over there just absolutely laying some suppressive fire down with her RPK, that's actually not an RPK. That is actually a Finnish Valmet model, or M78. So very similar, but something that the Finnish people like to do throughout history is take Russian weapons and make them better. So you can see that with like the Mosin Nagant and the M39. You can see that in this case with the RPK and the M78 Valmet. It is ultimately an RPK, but with tighter tolerances, but is still loose enough to be reliable. They also attribute it to be more accurate, have better sights, and all sorts of things like that. So even though in this case it was kind of used like an RPK, it was actually the Finnish M78. And if you haven't heard of Valmet, check them out. They make all sorts of neat firearms out there. And of course, she's underneath that truck and just like I said, absolutely laying down some suppressive fire. It's used both in 7.62x39 with its curved mag and also a drum mag at some point. So check that out, of course. And what I have on the table is an actual Russian RPK, kind of. It is in 5.45 and semi-auto, so it's not like, completely fun, but it's still really cool. But anyway, my number 4, the Valmet M78. The next firearm of choice in this movie is Patrick Swayze's Ruger Model 77. Now, as far as the actual caliber that he's using, don't know. I'm just going to assume it's .308, even though the barrel looks pretty thin, but, a lot of hunting rifles have a pretty thin barrel anyway, so, lightweight and stuff. But anyway, the Ruger Model 77 has been around for since the late 1960s, and a lot of different variations taken from that. Has your traditional 2-lug Mauser action, so super reliable, and again, just it's a classic bolt-action rifle that you just can't go wrong with. And on top of that, there's been a lot of cool variations on that, one of which was, I guess you could say, collaborated by Jeff Cooper, who's one of the legends in the firearms industry and the training industry, and Gunsight training. So they made the actual Gunsight Scout, which is again, magazine-fed, different variation of the Ruger Model 77. So We see that one scene where Patrick Swayze takes out the guy on the telephone pole, and it's funny because in a couple of scenes you just kind of like see him flopping around up there. I don't know if he's pretending to be like electrocuted or what's going on, but I don't know. It's kind of funny. So anyway, that's what is number 3 on my list, and let's roll into my number 2 pick. My number 2 pick, oh yeah, the Marlin 336. Now, of course, this is the Marlin 1895 SBL, chambered in 4570, great for hunting T-Rexes. Not the right movie, but not too bad at hunting or ambushing invaders in our country either. But the Marlin 336, it's been a classic 30-30 lever action that's been around since the late 1940s, and we see it used fairly often in the movie Red Dawn, of course. We see it in the back of the pickup truck towards the beginning of the movie, and of course during one of the ambush scenes, as I've mentioned previously. And there's just something about the types of firearms that they used in 1984, or the 1984 Red Dawn movie, and being just like, kind of like, these are the type of rifles and shotguns and everything else that I grew up with, and that would just be very common throughout the country. So it's just pretty cool that they've taken a lot of that and then put it into this movie, and it's just like, well, if there was an invading force into this country, that's probably what would have been used a lot of, just stuff that was kind of laying around, not a lot of militarized type of things, if that's what you want to call them. But today might be a little bit different. Slightly. It's exciting, right? No, but no, the Marlin 336 is classic. Now, recently, Marlin has been pretty much acquired by Ruger. So Ruger is now making a lot of the new Marlin lever actors. This is one of the last of the Marlin lever actors that was still made by Marlin. And it's something to, I don't know, something to think about as well. So what do you guys think about the acquisition? Ruger taking over Marlin, making Marlin lever actions. What do you guys think about that? But anyway, my number 2 pick, the Marlin 336 30-30 lever action. Now, my honorable mention here, frag grenades and RPGs, because they're used pretty heavily also. And there's that ambush scene right when the civilians are all about to be executed by the Russians. Well, the Wolverines come in and stop all of that nonsense, right? And then they make a perfect shot with a frag grenade, throwing it right into the hatch, the open hatch of that armored personnel carrier that the Russians were riding around in. That is, wow, man. Good shot. Anyway, my number 1 pick, the AKM. I mean, it's classic. It's just, it makes sense. It's Wolverines through and through, right? So the AKM is used extensively, or the AK, whatever variant you want to call it, is used extensively throughout the movie. Makes sense. We're getting invaded by Russians, and their primary firearm is this guy. And, well, everything else that we have weren't full auto, really, except from whatever else we acquired, whether it be a PKM or other type of machine guns, or the RPK, which we know is the Valmet. But the AK is obviously just used heavily. Chambered in 7.62 by 39, been around since the mid to late 40s. Just a classic design of reliability, functionality, ease of use, simplicity. What more could you ask for? And we actually recently went out to Thunder Ranch and we trained with an AK out there, hitting targets out to 300 yards with iron sights with no problem. And so to say that it's inaccurate, like that's a rumor that goes around, maybe not as accurate as its counterpart, the AR-15, but still very much so capable of getting the job done at those little bit greater distances. But anyway, that's my list for this one here. Of course, you've got other fun, fantastic firearms that had some pretty iconic roles too, because we live here with the single action army and, things like that. But great movie, a lot of fun. And if you were to compare that to the new Red Dawn movie with Josh Peck, Chris Hemsworth, which one's your favorite? I'm just curious. I just want to see what you guys think and hear from you. I think I know what everybody's going to say. But let me know, do you like the original or the remake of Red Dawn? And do you agree or disagree with my list? Do you think some guns from the movie should have definitely made it, or some that were on my list shouldn't be? Let me know down in the comments section below.